I think I mentioned it before, but on my last cruise on the Caribbean Princess, there were some highly irritable people. Yeah, but fortunately, the universe provided us with a hero. I saw the wildest cruise argument on this last cruise when a tough guy put an older woman, maybe a granny, put her right in her place. Yeah, this one's crazy. Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to La Lido Loca. I am your host, Tony, and today we have a very special episode. I want to talk about what turned out to be one of the most dangerous places on the Caribbean Princess. And no, this dangerous place wasn't on the open decks during the storm in the North Atlantic. Wasn't even at the buffet when kids were running amok, unwashed hands handling tongs and food. And it wasn't even at the elevator when seemingly every time the door opened, somebody rushed in on you before you could get out. None of those places. It was the Princess Theater. Welcome to the mighty Princess Theater, home of entertainment and danger. This was the spot that I saw so many people get in arguments over on this cruise, because people that go on Princess cruises tend to go to the production shows, and maybe that theater is just too small for the amount of people that are cruising on that cruise ship. But every night that there was a big production show, there was an argument. I'm going to tell you about two. One kind of, innocuous, one kind of tame, but another one pretty serious. So let's go to the danger zone. And before we get to the danger zone, let me give you some context. I was on this cruise with one of my very best friends, Don Terrace from Don's Family Vacations. We had such a good time over the 16-day cruise. We always have a great adventure. Make sure you go check out Don for a whole different perspective on this cruise. He's also getting close to a subscriber milestone, 200,000 subscribers. And well, if you know anything about my friend Don Terrace, he loves himself a production show. And that's one of those things that we have in common. I like live performances on cruise ships. But one place that we diverge in our love for cruise ship theater activities is where we sit. As a matter of fact, here's a picture of my buddy Don's center front row. And I don't really like sitting there. I like to sit a little further back so I can kind of take in the whole deal. But when I'm with my buddy Don, there'll be many times where I do sit on the front row, and it does end up with some pretty cool adventures. We got this really cool picture on the last night of the cruise where, for the performer, we were all shining our lights, and I'm like, well, this is cool because everybody behind us has lights. A great time with my friend Don. But one of the nights of the production show, I got there early. Don and I were sitting right there on the front, and a couple came up and they were looking for a seat. There was just one seat empty beside of me, and they had this conversation. He's like, honey, you can sit here and I'll go find some other place to sit. And she was like, no, we can't be apart, but I want to be able to see the show. And he's like, well, maybe we can come back to the later show. And she was like, well, I don't really want to come back to a later show. I guess I'll just sit here and you go sit somewhere else. I heard all this play out because it was playing out right next to the seat next to me. And so she sat there. Eventually the man came to rest on a banister. The more I sat there, the more I felt bad, because I had, in order to get the type of internet that I wanted, it financially made sense for me to get the Princess Premier package. And an interesting perk of the Princess Premier package is there is a whole section of seats in the main theater for these production shows that they save for people that have the Princess Premier package. And they save these seats until 5 minutes before showtime. And well, we can debate whether or not this is a good perk or not, but because there are these empty seats that are essentially empty for the most part until 5 minutes before the show, there tends to be a lot of people that want those seats. So they wait with bated breath to swoop in and get one of these seats 5 minutes before showtime. And so I saw this lady distressed. She was sad that she was not with her husband. She noticed that her husband's now sitting on a banister, which didn't seem very safe. He was elevated up, just kind of, sat on a banister. And I said to myself, you have these premier seats there, obviously at a different point in the theater. There's a lot of them empty. I can handle one show up there in those premier seats. Don's fine by himself, whether I'm there or not. And I told the lady that I was going to vacate my seat. I would tell her husband to come sit next to her so that they could have whatever night they were hoping to have. I was the hero. I didn't care either way. I wasn't really trying. I guess I was the hero. And so I thought all was well. I went up, I walked the stairs. I said to the gentleman, hey man, I can get a seat somewhere else pretty easily. Why don't you go sit with your wife? And he seemed pleased with that. It seemed like that really made his night. And then I went and I sat down in the premier seat, and that's where the ruckus began. That's where the chaos popped off. Oh wait, I realize I've gotten ahead of myself. I'm going to tell you about two incidents. The first one, not as chaotic as the one as me taking my seat in the premier seating. This one occurred before the couple even showed up to claim the empty seat next to me. It occurred behind me and to the right. I only heard it, but what I heard was apparently someone sat down in an empty seat. I'm assuming that's what happened because the person next to the person that sat down in the empty seat said, oh, my wife will be here in a second. She's going to be sitting there. And the person that sat in the empty seat said, hey, there's no saving of seats on this cruise. We've been in this theater long enough now that everybody should know that. I'm going to be sitting here, and if you have a problem with it, we can just go talk to the manager over there. The person that had brought up that their wife was going to sit there didn't say anything. Again, there was a real palpable tension in the theater every night that there was a production show because of the scarcity or the popularity or the whatever around being able to sit. And it's a wild thing. So Don and I, to get those front seats to sit exactly where we want, we were showing up to those shows 90 minutes to an hour and 45 minutes early. Think about that. That's the wasted life that we're living. We're not going to do anything else on the cruise ship except sit in these theater seats for an hour and 45 minutes before the show. And, that's what you got to do. And it's a weird thing, but that's what you got to, there's got to be a better system. I asked Don, we talked about it. Like, do you think like a reservation system would be better? I don't know what the answer is to that, but if you want to get the seats that you want to get in the theater, you got to put in the time. It's kind of reminiscent of like when people would camp out before the next Star Wars movie. Like if we just had a tent, Don and I would have been those nerds waiting for the show. No bar service in there either, which is weird. But okay, back to the matter at hand. I had moved from the front row. I went up and I sat down in the available premium seating, which I knew I had full authority to. And as soon as I sat down, I heard a murmur and a mumbling behind me. I wasn't privy to everything that had been going on in these premium seats on the previous shows. And I was a little naive. I sat down in my seat and I started to settle in to see if I had a good view of the stage, if I could still see my friend Don down there having a good time. When I heard a loud voice from behind me say, "Did you check him? Did you check him? Is he allowed to sit there?" And I had about a 2-second delay when I was tapped on the shoulder by a cruise ship worker that said, Sir, what is your cabin number?" And it took me a second and I was like, oh, my cabin number, it's D120. And apparently a list was checked and she was like, oh, you're okay to sit here. And I was like, yeah, I paid that money. I knew I was okay. And so then she had to turn, and then I was invested in it. I watched what was going on. She had to turn around to a throng of people that were lined up behind these premium seats. And she explained to the front of the line, to my benefit, that I was allowed to sit there. So I got through that interaction unscathed because I had not done anything untowards to all of those people that were waiting in line. And more people came to sit down. It was about 10 minutes until showtime. So that meant that in just 5 minutes, any of those seats that had not been claimed by the people that had the premier package would be up for grabs. And at that point, 10 minutes out, there were only 5 or 6 seats left in that area. And there was a line of about 20 people. So interesting. You got a line of people against the wall. You could tell the tension was high. The line was directly behind me, but to my left appeared an older woman. I don't know how old she was. I use the term granny. I don't know if she was anybody's granny or not, but she had that granny vibe, right? I'm old. I'm in my 50s. My mom's in her 70s. There's a lot of people that cruise that are in their 80s and their 90s. I certainly mean no disrespect by the term granny. I'm just trying to build a visual image for you. Smaller lady, looked like she was, of good fitness, petite, and she was just a wonderful looking granny there. And she was standing off to the side. So on this side of me, there was the granny. On this side of me and behind me was 20 people in line. And in between them, there was a cruise ship worker. What's wild, and we would probably have to test this experimentally, I think it took maybe 15 or 20 seconds for the mob, for the throng waiting in line for these last few seats to have the realization that there was a lady standing there that possibly was going to try to take one of those seats, and she was not in line. So I think the same voice that called into question the validity of my butt being in the seat, I think I heard that same voice go, What's up with that lady? Is she trying to get a seat? The poor cruise worker, like really in the middle of a rock and a hard place, she took the bait and she asked the lady, she said, "Ma'am, what are you doing?" And the lady said, "Well, I'm waiting for these seats to become available. I've been here for the last 35 minutes and I'm ready to take my seat." And well, that was not the right answer for the masses. The masses said, "Whoa, the line is over here. Hey, cruise worker, tell her the line is over, tell her." And so the poor cruise ship employee goes, "Well, ma'am, the queue is over here behind me and these people have the first priority at these seats." And while you would think that admonition would have turned most people around, nope, not this lady. She was bold. It was unexpected. I did not expect to hear from her what I heard. She said, "Well, I don't know why you didn't see me. I've been here the whole time that this line was here. You never told me to get in line. I'm certainly going to take one of these seats. I've been here for 35, 40 minutes. I've been here longer than there was a line." Well, you can imagine that interchange went over like a ton of bricks with the mob. And they're like, no, that's not right. She's this, no. And the cruise worker, she acquiesced. She said, "Okay, maybe I didn't see you. You're going to be part of the people that get the seats." And people were upset. And of course, it leaves us in a quandary. What do we need when we are in a quandary? We need a hero. I need a hero. We need a hero, and sat just 3 seats to my right was our hero. Now, this was a man that probably was older than me, maybe late 50s, early 60s. I don't work at a carnival. I'm not really good at judging this kind of thing, but he was a big kind of hulking man. He oozed machismo. And, I'm a big guy too. So when him and his wife came into those seats, they had the premier package. After they were checked, they were able to be seated. I had to get up so that they could get in. And he got up. He got up to my right and he said, "Excuse me for a second." And so I stood up and he goes, "You don't have to sit down. This won't take but a second." So this kind of hulking machismo, younger than the woman, than the granny, younger than that man, walked past me and stood in the personal space of the granny and said, "Look, you are a rude individual. You cut line at the art auction and you're trying to do it here, and it's despicable the way that you're treating all of these other people, and I am not going to stand for it." And well, as you would expect, Granny quivered in her boots under the imposing, sight of this huge machismo man. She quaked in her boots and she scampered off into the night. Except that didn't happen at all. Granny looked that guy right in the eye and said, "Look, why don't you mind your business? This is my life, and you don't know how long I've been here, and you're wrong. And so you mind your business and you go sit down with your wife." I'm standing up the whole time waiting for this guy to yell at this lady and this lady to yell back and the mob behind to egg the whole thing on. And I'm just standing there and I feel like maybe my face has gone akimbo. I think maybe my face has gone into shocked mode. And so he stands there looking at her with his full aggressive machismo upsetness, and he turns around and he goes and sits down. And then just about at that time, the announcement comes, "It's 5 minutes before showtime. Feel free to take any seat that you would like in the theater." The lady who had just gone through the altercation with the big guy, she just went down and took one of the available seats. After she took her seat, we still had grumbling from the mob. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 seats left. I saw a couple get split up, a husband able to see the show. His wife had to wait to see the later show. And we sat there there about 2 minutes before showtime. And again, maybe I was just sitting there dumbfounded by this exchange because Machismo guy starts to make a speech reminiscent of Mark Antony at the funeral of Caesar. He has to proclaim, why the action just happened that just happened. And he was like, you know what? I just can't stand rude people. And sometimes you just have to call rude people out. And this was my moment to call out rude people. And I sat there and I thought, but it didn't do anything. It didn't. You just yelled at somebody that probably could have been your mother. You just got into an older lady's face and just yelled at her, and she backed you down. She got her seat, you got called out in front of a crowd, and now you're making just some post-argument speech trying to justify why you just yelled at a lady in the middle of a public place. Look, I'm not exaggerating. There were some wild human interactions on this Princess Cruise Line. It goes back to a theory that I have been working on. I feel like as a society, we are more ready to shoot our mouths off than ever. And, back in the day, you could go back a couple hundred years, there were always consequences to shooting your mouth off. And now it seems like there's less and less consequences of shooting your mouth off. And so there's more leeway to shoot your mouth off. And I think that we see that. And sometimes in the cruise space, there are other places where there are consequences to shooting your mouth off. Sometimes you can't shoot your mouth off without consequence. The consequence is closer to you than you think. And sometimes that causes other cruise lines to get a bad reputation because you can't just shoot your mouth off. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I feel like there's a breakdown of human decency, but I could never imagine feeling the need to be so justified to just randomly yell at a lady in a theater. I'm sure some will say, well, you should have defended the honor of that lady and said something to that guy and possibly got into it, but I think she did okay on her own. She sat there and enjoyed the show, and this guy had to deal with that. I tell you who I really feel bad for is the cruise employee, the lady that was working the door there. She was there. The lady made her case that she had been there for a half an hour. The mob didn't like it. And I heard her at one point say to the mob, like, what, look, this isn't even what really I do for my job on the cruise. I'm not here to referee you guys over seating. So I completely empathize with that. Shame on us for making these cruise employees have to be put in a tight spot like that. But maybe they should be. Maybe, with this setup and the scarcity of the seats, maybe there should be a designated arbiter of who gets to sit where and why. And, sometimes you got to take your lumps. It was wild. I never thought that giving up my seat on the front row would thrust me into such a weird subculture in the Princess Theater. Wow. What do you think about this one? Leave a comment below. Thanks for watching it. Hit the like button, subscribe for more. This is Tony for La Lido Loca. Until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.